on my Travel Ones podcast, I'm lucky to have Katie Cerami. How are you today, Katie?
Doing great, Pete. Thanks for asking. I'm so happy to be here.
Oh, I'm excited to talk to you. You're the CEO, founder, managing partner, director of Lost Layovers.
Yes, that is correct.
How's that sound?
It sounds pretty awesome, right?
But you're also the janitor, you know, the travel agent. You're everything.
All of the things, all of the things.
It's so awesome to get to talk to you. It's so cool that you're on this journey, and to me, you're a young person. So, kind of give us a background of how you got started.
So I got started about 5.5 years ago. I always kind of had this itch in me where I wanted to travel the world and experience different places and cultures and people. And when I neared the ending of my bachelor's degree in hospitality and tourism management, I started applying to different airlines because I figured it was a way for me to travel the world and get paid for it. So
Sure.
I kept applying to different airlines, and after college, it didn't happen right away. So I got involved with working in hotels and casinos and restaurant management for a little while. And then I eventually landed a job with a charter airline and kind of went down that path for 3 years, flying for three different airlines and as a VIP charter flight attendant. And through that, I started taking pictures while I was traveling, started on an iPhone, and then I was gifted a Canon point and shoot camera. And then from there, I went and I bought my first mirrorless camera and then upgraded from that about a year ago. And actually, about a year ago around this time, I quit my job to, travel more on my own terms and pursue my own business ventures. And now I'm doing just that out here in Hawaii.
You're on Maui, which is a great place to work. Um, eh, what made you think you could do this? I'm always curious. Like you're a young single woman and you're traveling the world basically by yourself.
Right.
You're a photographer, a videographer. I mean, what made you think you could do this?
Um, Honestly, I kind of just always knew that it was possible. I never really understood necessarily how it could be possible, but I kind of just told myself if you go through the motions and you kind of just meet people and make connections and nourish your relationships and stuff, it'll eventually work out. And things just kept coming together as I was traveling. I was meeting all these people and things were happening, and I would get different gigs. And that's kind of exactly how it happened here when I got to Hawaii. I came out here on a work trip and I was like, you know what? Like, I don't really have necessarily anywhere that I need to be at this moment. My apartment in Fort Lauderdale is sublet. So why don't I just stay here and see,
Yeah.
what they have out here? And then different job opportunities started falling in my lap, like in the tourism field and stuff. And I was like, it kind of just made me realize the more you put yourself out there and the more you make connections and make it a point to be real with people and open and honest and just connect with them on a genuine level, 90% of the time, people are going to be willing to help you out or point you in the right direction,
Yeah.
or, they know somebody that knows somebody that, might need your services or need your help or what have you. And kind of just always having that mindset of knowing that it'll always work out and it is possible if you put in the effort and the consistency behind it, it'll eventually, come to fruition. And that's kind of just how I've always thought about it.
I mean, it's definitely a hustle, right? I mean,
Sure.
it's not like you have a 9 to 5 and you know you're going to have this and that set up. I mean, how, but so you started doing photography how long ago?
About 5 years ago when I became a flight attendant.
But like you said, it was an iPhone. So then you went to like a 5D, or were you still like on the Rebel?
I was using a Canon point and shoot, which is a camera where you don't have the interchangeable
Anything?
lenses, so it was
Yeah.
just a lens on it that couldn't be changed. And then used that for about 6 months, and then bought my first mirrorless camera, which was probably about 3.5 years ago now. So shooting on a professional camera for about 3.5 years.
Okay. And you're doing Photoshop and any of the
Yeah, I
Lightroom?
use Lightroom and Photoshop.
Okay.
Yeah.
Because
And then about a year and a half ago, I started flying drones and doing aerial
oh,
photography, aerial
how's that?
videography. It's great. I love it because it kind of keeps the aspect of being a flight attendant there for me,
Uh,
being able to have that aerial perspective.
I had my first experience with a drone where you put the goggles on in
Okay.
it was on the Big Island. The guy was out there. We were on the point. Or no, it was on Kauai. And the guy was flying it around, and I was just and he was the drone was far away, like you couldn't see it.
Right.
And so he brought it back, and he goes, "Do you want to try it?" And I go, "I don't want to control it, but I'd love to look through, you know." And he did it, and so he was watching. So he ran it close by, but had the goggles on. I was like, "Oh my god!"
Right.
I felt like I was flying. It was cool.
Yeah. You can see exactly what the drone sees with those goggles, which that's going to be my next venture is those FPV drones. But they're a little bit tricky from what I understand because the movements are a lot different. They're a lot
Oh yeah,
faster and you're wearing the goggles, so it's a whole different
feel.
perspective. You're not just looking down at a phone screen or a smart controller. You're actually seeing what
Yeah,
the
that I felt
actual
like I was
camera.
flying. He brought it down, not super close to water, but pretty close, and I was like,
Yeah,
"Oh." I mean, it kind of shakes you.
probably pretty cool, I would
It
imagine.
was very cool, very very
Yeah,
cool.
awesome.
So, what's next? I mean, do you think about what's next? I mean, like your next trip is it? I mean, especially with the pandemic. I
Sometimes
mean, you started this
I do.
business during a pandemic. I mean, that's
Yeah,
crazy.
I
You know,
did. I started building it in November during the pandemic.
yeah,
Um, do I think about what's next? Sometimes I do, sometimes I don't. Because sometimes I don't like to think too far into the future and I kind of like to keep my attention in the present moment and what I'm doing and where I am now. But at times I do like to plan ahead just so I have a plan and a strategy in place of what I'm going to do next. So for me, as of right now, I plan to stay out here for another 6 months
nice.
and continue to build and establish brand partnerships and relationships with people and businesses around here on the island and also just around the world as well, and continue to build my portfolio and build my brand and just kind of keep climbing the ladder of what I want to do with all of this and really get a clearer understanding of what my impact is with all of this in the world, and travel and um, what all of that really looks like on a bigger scale.
Well, it's gonna be interesting, I think, for you because you're right. I mean, I think everything's relationships. You know,
Yeah.
and so if you build a relationship with the Hilton there, would you be able to work that into the Hilton in Hong Kong and then set up a photo shoot for the Hilton, you know, or whatever? But
Sure.
just relationship wise,
Yeah, I mean, I think it really comes down to who's running the property and where, because the thing is with some of the hotels, when it comes to marketing directors and stuff, some of the hotels have marketing directors for each specific branch, and some
yeah,
have marketing directors that oversee multiple different properties. So it kind of just depends. But the thing with the hotels is once you have the partnerships and establish the connections and create the content and execute it in a way that they're happy with, 90% of the time, they're likely to allow you to visit other properties and work for them at other properties as well.
well, and like yourself, I mean, they probably won't stay at that property forever, and as they move
Right.
around,
Right.
your contact is now moving around.
Right. And the thing with it too is, when you establish the connections, it gives you the opportunity to go back
Yeah,
and do work for them again. And that's what I like about, keeping a focus on relationships because it allows you that opportunity that if you do want to go back and, do more work or do things a different way, because we're all constantly learning and growing as
yeah.
human beings. And obviously that's interchangeable with art as well. So, you may be able to go back and do things a little bit differently than you did the first, the second, or the third time.
How important is social media to your business?
It's pretty important. I mean, considering that that's where the basis of my entire business lies.
Yeah,
Everything's kind of funneled through social media, through links, and obviously, it's kind of like essentially become my portfolio now, where all of my work is showcased on there, aside from my website and my blog, and I have a print shop linked in there as well. But for the most part, everything that I do is through social media, because these brands want to see that you have the quality of content, the engagement, the
Yeah.
reach, and the influence.
I mean, that as an older person, an old guy, my generation, we say, social media is terrible. It's ruined the young people. And I always say, it's like, it's no different than anything else. If you use it for good, it becomes good. If you use it for bad, it becomes bad.
Right.
And there's people like you out there that are using it for good, and it's awesome.
Yeah. It's a powerful tool if you use it
Yeah.
correctly, you know? You either use it or it uses you.
Well, I was going to say, even back 20 years ago, your business would not exist. I
Right.
mean, it just, there was no social media to have. I mean, you literally had to be a professional. I mean, it just didn't exist. Like now, it's like, even like my business, my podcast wouldn't exist 20 years
Right.
ago. I'd have to
Yeah.
be on an accredited radio show, and I'd have to work my ranks, And instead,
Sure.
now I can just reach out to people and say, "Hey, you want to be on my show?" And they're like, "Yeah, great."
Right.
So,
Which is awesome because it gives you a whole different realm of opportunity to kind of work in, you know? And I think that that's really cool to see, when you look back 20 years, how none of this stuff existed. And then, we're in the present now of having all these things. But then you think, okay, but what is 20 years further down the line in the
yeah.
future going to look like?
Well, I see. I even look at it as someone's could potentially watch this episode with you and I, and they could be going, God, I would love to do what she's doing. I've thought I could,
Right.
and they just need to hear that someone else did it. And
Yeah.
so this is just a channel for someone else to go, hey, I would love to travel the world. Name some of the places you've been to so far for.
Yikes.
Yeah.
I've been to Japan, Iceland, Ireland, Spain, Bulgaria, Romania, Jordan, Kuwait, the Bahamas, Dominican Republic, Mexico,
Greece.
uh, Greece, yeah, Germany, Belgium, quite a few places.
you know, not bad for a Jersey girl, right?
Right, not bad for a Jersey girl.
Yeah. Do you think that how important were your parents when you were growing up? That were they the ones that said, "Hey, you can accomplish whatever you want," or was it your friends, or is it?
Um, my dad had always said to me, you can do whatever you set your mind out to do as long as you don't quit. And I think that that's where consistency comes into play because if you
Yeah.
keep pushing at it and you keep pushing at it and you keep pushing at it, no matter how many times it doesn't work out or, partnerships don't work out or whatever it may be, eventually something's got to give. So eventually, somewhere, somehow, you're going to eventually break through. And yet yes, it can be frustrating and it can lead you to points where we all have these thoughts of this isn't working out, maybe I should move on and do something else. But I really think, and through my experience, the more you keep pushing at it and just nudging and nudging and nudging, eventually you're going to break the glass.
Yeah, I agree with that. You know, we see the pictures of. I mean, your pictures are beautiful.
Thank you.
What are the downsides? Like, yeah, obviously, you're not going to post too much of the downside parts out there. You know, what?
um I think a lot of it is, being a content creator and someone that travels and does things like this for a living. When you're creating content like that, it takes you more so out of the moment. And even for me, it's very peaceful and still for me to be shooting and looking through a camera and stuff. It's like, as a photographer and a videographer and a drone pilot, you're always looking through things either through a lens or a
Uh,
screen. So I'm not going to say it takes away the beauty from it because it doesn't, but you're looking at life through a whole different perspective. And I think sometimes that's something that could be a little bit challenging for me because I'm a person that likes to be in the present moment. So
yeah,
sometimes there's moments where I'm just like, I wish I could just put down the camera and just enjoy this. But at the same time, you have to get the content for the brand or whatever it is, that you're doing for work. So
yeah,
it kind of takes away from it in that sense. And also, traveling can be frustrating for people. Things happen, so you always have to be keen to adapting to change easy and overcoming challenges and be able to problem solve quickly because, sometimes there's delayed flights, sometimes you miss your connection, sometimes, the reservations are wrong, or the car rental isn't there when you get there. So, there's a lot of obstacles that you have to overcome with traveling. And another big challenge is changing time zones a lot. That was a big thing that, I dealt with, especially being a flight attendant, where you're 18 days on the road, and 10 days out of those 18 days you're in a different time zone, and then by the
Yeah.
time you get home it's like, okay, like what is going on here? I don't even know what,
Where I'm at.
time zone
Yeah.
my body acclimated to. So it really can take a toll on you, not only physically, but mentally and emotionally and spiritually as well. So I think it's really important to have certain practices and stuff while you're traveling that kind of keep you set in a grounded state of being.
Do you share that on your blogs?
I do, yeah.
Okay.
I like to talk a lot about, my experience, not just from a traveling standpoint, but also from a mental standpoint and a physical standpoint as well.
I think that's key. I mean, that's the one thing I don't think a lot of people that don't travel, they don't realize. I've talked to a lot of athletes, and whether they're MMA fighters that have to go to Abu Dhabi and now fight, and it's the next day,
Yeah,
and, and Olympic athletes that now have to go back to Japan.
right.
So it can really affect you. I mean, for me, like I don't like going. I'm in California. And I don't like going to the East Coast.
Yeah,
So I lose at 3 hours. I love coming back, but
yeah.
I
It's the
mean,
time change is a funny thing, because it's like I think about it too, I spent all these years on an airplane and stuff, and it takes a toll on the body. You
yeah,
might not feel it, but every single day of your life, you're traveling at over 700 miles an hour, and it obviously has an effect on the body. And I think people tend to forget about that. Even when you're driving in a car, your body may not feel 60, 70, 80 miles an hour, but it's still probably not speeds that the body is used to traveling at. So, when you're going at high speeds like that, it takes a toll. And then on top of it, you're adding, all these different time changes. Like when I came here from the East Coast in Florida, it was a
6
6 hour
hours.
time difference backwards.
Yeah,
But, thankfully, I kind of, when I was a flight attendant, I had to learn and teach myself, when to force myself to sleep and when to force myself to stay awake, so that when I got to these places, I could maximize my time and essentially be automatically acclimated when I got there. And that's exactly what I did when I came here. I left like in the middle of the day, and I slept the whole time so that I could stay up enough when I got here so
but
that when
it's
it
the
was
morning.
nighttime, I could go to sleep. And then I was just right away on the normal, schedule, acclimated to the time zone.
I think that's key, and that's what a lot of the Olympic athletes I've talked to say.
Yeah.
They'll start training, and even like the one female fighter I talked to, she'll start doing her training at the time of when the fight's going to be, which is 8 or 9 o'clock at night, East
Okay.
Coast, so it's just
Yeah.
different.
Yeah. It's a great way. It's kind of like almost like a little bit mathematical to try to figure out,
Yeah,
okay, I'm leaving at this time, and if I sleep during this time, then when I get there at this time, I could stay up for this amount of time and I'll be good.
yeah. But we did that. Like, unfortunately, we had our trip to Japan scheduled for April of 2020,
Mhm.
and in March of 2020 they shut everything down.
Right.
So, but we were doing the same thing. I started going, okay, well, if we leave at 3 o'clock in the morning, we're gonna land, blah blah blah.
Yeah.
But it's pretty easy now to figure that out. But
Right.
I think I don't know how people. I mean, I have one friend that on the whim flew to Israel, and I'm like literally, he's one of my accounts, and he goes, hey, are you going back by through San Diego? I said, yeah. And he goes, hey, can you take me to the airport? And I go, sure. What time's your flight? And he goes, I don't know yet. I'll book it on our way. I'm like, really? He goes, yeah. Let me just go home and get a bag of stuff and tell my wife. I'm like, really? He goes, and he booked the flight sitting next to me, and I was like, so there was no math going on there.
Yeah. I've done stuff like that before too, and it's like an adrenaline rush. It's an
Yeah,
exciting thing to do, to just be completely spontaneous like that and just book a flight and go. Like, not that this was a crazy trip or anything, but last last year I had a friend call me one night. It was like 11 o'clock at night. I was living in Arizona at the time. And she's like, "Hey, what are you doing tomorrow? You know, my birthday's this weekend." And I was like, "I don't really know. Like, I'm on call for work, but what's
Yeah.
up?" And she was like, she was flying for another airline at the time. And I was at a different one than she was. And she was like, "Come meet us in Colorado Springs. We have a 2-day layover and it's my birthday. Come to Colorado Springs." So I was like, "All right, what flight are you guys on? I'll meet you somewhere and we'll all go to Colorado Springs together." So they had a work trip that laid over in
Yeah.
Dallas, Texas. So I booked a flight that night, left the next morning at 5 a.m. and flew from Phoenix, Arizona to Dallas. Surprised them all in the airport in Dallas because I used to work with them all. And then we all flew on the same United flight to Colorado Springs and had a whole weekend in Colorado Springs.
That's pretty awesome.
Yeah, it was awesome.
So I'm going to ask you a tough one, I think.
Okay.
How does it deal? How do your personal relationships handle being so spontaneous?
It can be difficult at times, because you try to make plans with people and you try to do certain things or, attend family events or holidays or
Yeah.
weddings or what have you. But, you know, when you're in a place like I am and you never really know where you're going to be or when you're going to be there, it can be a little bit challenging. And I think it could take a toll on you sometimes, and it's really important, especially for me, having so many different relationships that are important to me in so many different places of the world. I think one of the most important things for me is making sure that I cut out time in my schedule to reach out and catch up
Yeah.
and connect with these people to make sure that I'm maintaining those relationships and that they still know that even though I'm far away, I'm still there and the connection is still maintained that way. But it can totally be difficult, especially now with me being in Hawaii and which is now 5 hours from the East Coast, but that's where my entire family is, and a
Yeah.
lot of my close friends are in Florida and such. And when I'm mid morning, they're already like eating dinner. So it's like if you're not up early or getting them before it's too late, 90% of the time you don't
Miss
talk to
'em.
them because it's either too late, or if they call you early in the morning, I'm sleeping because it's 3 or 4 in the morning.
Yeah.
It definitely can be challenging. And I think a lot of relationships, I wouldn't say a lot, but some relationships tend to kind of just fade away because of that.
Sure.
Um,
Well, I think that's life too, though.
yeah, of course. But I think that that's the most challenging thing is, trying to make sure that you keep those connections and nurture them and really keep them close to home. Because if you don't, since you're not around, like I said, they kind of just they dwindle away.
Yeah. But just being able to FaceTime or and have video. I mean, the this little thing right here is incredible.
Yeah, absolutely.
Because I remember my daughter did a summer internship in London, and
Yeah,
we were still FaceTiming every day. And
yeah,
I was just like, wow, this is cool. Like I'm
yeah,
literally seeing what you see and talk, and
yeah.
yeah,
It's pretty awesome to have FaceTime because it's like like you said, you could be somewhere and I can, call someone and be someone really cool and be like, I just wanted to call you and show you this really quick.
yeah,
Look how cool this is. Like, look at how beautiful this is, and it's a really cool thing because it almost makes people feel like they're there with you for a second. And, I get a lot of messages from people, especially through Instagram, of people being like, "Oh, I live vicariously through you, and you're so
yeah,
lucky that you get to travel the world and, have all these experiences." And I think that's why it's so great that I'm able to share that stuff online,
yep.
not only so other people can see it, but they get to see it from my point of view and how I see it. So I
Well, and I
think
think
it's a really cool thing.
sound the same way. Like whenever I take work trips, I would take my camera with me, and now it's a
Right.
lot on my iPhone. But I had one of my friends text me back saying, "Do you work?" Because I go, "Well, do you want to see the picture of me sitting in the office, or do you want to see the picture of me when I'm driving to my next location?" It's like no
Right.
one wants to see the grind part, but they want to see the
Right.
beautiful scenery.
They want to see the exciting stuff.
Sure.
Yeah.
But then it gave off the impression that I'm not working, that I'm just driving around taking fun pictures, and I'm like,
Right.
no.
And I
Uh,
mean, I've gotten that as well. I get a lot of questions like, how do you travel so much, or what do you
Yeah.
do for work? And I think people lose sight of the fact that I've been traveling on my own terms for about a year now, but before that, I had always made it a priority to choose a job that allowed me to travel
Sure.
because it kept that aspect of adventure there for me, but I was also allowed to get paid for it.
Which
And that
helps.
was cool because all of that kind of led up to me figuring out certain things and then realizing, okay, like if I build a brand on this, then I can do this, which will lead to this.
Right.
And then, you know,
Do you have a mentor or anybody or somebody maybe you look up to online?
yeah, I have a personal coach that I work
Okay.
with that works with me on building out my brand and next steps and keeping me accountable and stuff. And then I'll also do mentorship programs with other photographers that are inspiring to me, and
Nice.
obviously YouTube. And I'm always looking for different courses or different webinars and things that I can take and invest in myself to better myself.
And that's the other uh, beautiful thing about YouTube and everything Google is I do the
Yeah,
same thing with podcasting.
right.
So I'm always looking at new mics or this or
Yeah,
camera setup or lights or
right.
yeah.
There's so much you can learn, in photography there's an endless amount of
Yeah.
different things that you can do with it. So it's really interesting. One of the things I got into recently is I started doing a lot of um like nighttime photography, shooting the stars and the Milky Way,
Yeah.
and also doing light painting and stuff. And it's just interesting to see the different things that you could create with technology and also your own perspective and creativity.
Well, and the I would say the relative low cost. I mean, Lightroom isn't cheap, and
Right.
Photoshop's not cheap, and your cameras aren't cheap, and lenses certainly are not cheap. But relatively, you're not talking $800,000 to start a
Right.
business.
Right. Right.
With a lease and overhead and employees and this and that. So
Yeah.
I know how much lenses cost. I have lens envy all the time when I'm out and about. I'm like, oh, I
It's
go.
the
My
most
wife,
expensive
my wife's
part of
like,
the camera.
my wife's like, how much is that one? I go, that's probably about $5,000. She's like,
Yeah.
oh my god, really? I go, yeah.
Yeah.
So
They're definitely a little bit pricey for sure. And it adds up quick over time. The more camera equipment, you buy and stuff, it ends up being a large investment. I mean, not right now, between all of the stuff that I have, I probably have about 25, $30,000 in
yeah.
just equipment alone.
Yeah, are you trying to resell any of it as you don't use it anymore?
Um, Not really. I mean,
Okay.
I think for me, I would prefer to like do a giveaway and give back rather
Okay.
than reselling something like that. Cause I think there's a lot of people out there that have the desire to do photography or get into photography and things like that. And it's expensive to get started. It's equipment isn't cheap, as we know. Cameras are decent cameras anywhere from 800 to $5,000 just
Yeah.
for the body, depending on what you get, and then you throw the lenses in there, and you're at $7,000-8,000 really quickly. So I went to a workshop in Greece in June, and they did a raffle and they gave away a drone,
Oh,
and I
nice.
actually won it. And I had at the time the Mavic Pro 2, which I had bought, and then I also had a Mavic Air 2, which I had crashed when I was in Mexico and then got the replacement, which I then ended up gifting to a friend because I'm like, look, I'm not even in Florida. I'm in Hawaii. It's sitting in my storage
Yeah.
unit. If you want
Go ahead
to
and
go
get it.
get it, it's yours. Have fun. Like, I, because I think, that stuff will come back to you, and I don't need 3 drones.
See, we're in the same boat. Like I my first equipment for my podcast was this. That's all I
Yeah.
had. Like
Right.
and I used to tape it to my face to keep it up because it used to move around. That so then I bought a mic,
Right.
a Yeti mic, and then um, the guitars for Billy Idol, Steve Stevens, who I interviewed, recommended
Okay.
this mic. So I had the
Right.
Yeti mic, so I gave it away to a friend that was talking about starting a podcast.
Right.
It's like,
Right.
it was like $100. I could have resold it
Yeah.
for $100, but whatever.
Right.
So
Yeah.
I feel you.
Yeah. It's just like, I feel like it gives you a sense of fulfillment. I feel like to be able to do something like that for somebody, and it's like, what are you gonna make off of it? A couple $100, you know what I mean? I'd rather give somebody else an opportunity to do something that they
Yeah,
love than sell it and make a quick buck off of it.
I hear you. I hear you. So,
Yeah.
so you got 6 more months in Hawaii. Are you trying
Yeah.
to get to the other islands? Are you island hopping at all, or are you just staying on Maui?
I do plan to see some of the islands. I'd like to get over to the Big Island and see the volcano before it stops erupting. And
Yeah.
I definitely want to see Oahu and Kauai.
Yeah. We want to go back to when we went to Kauai. We got the most rain they've ever had in 24 hours.
Yeah,
They had like 22 inches of rain in one day.
that's crazy.
So they were rescuing people off the helicopters off the roofs and the flooding. We weren't allowed to go see 80% of the island because of flooding.
Yeah,
So we literally were like in our hotel room for like 3 days on Kauai. We're like,
I
ah,
hear it's super beautiful there, though. Very green and lush and
it's the Jurassic
alive.
Park island.
Yeah,
So on the backside where you have to take a helicopter and all that. But yeah, it's
yeah,
literally where they filmed Jurassic Park.
yeah.
So,
Very, very cool.
so what are you shooting now? Are you anything you can? I mean, I want my listeners to. I've seen your stuff, but what are
Yeah.
you focusing on?
So I do obviously a lot of landscape stuff, which is kind of that's my stuff that I do for me. My landscape stuff is what I do for me, and then I do obviously hotel stuff.
Yeah,
Recently started getting into some product photography, working with some different brands doing product photography. Started getting into light painting, and then I also work as a little side gig as an independent contractor with some photography companies out here
oh, nice.
doing, family photo shoots, engagements, weddings, stuff like that. Just for extra money. It's a little bit expensive out here, and
Yeah,
just good to have,
a
you
little
know,
expensive. It's the most expensive place in the United States. But go ahead.
sure. But it's good for me because I like doing things like that because I'm constantly building relationships.
Yeah,
You know, like I said previously, that's one of the most important things to me. So I'm getting to connect and meet with other photographers that, you know, are doing the same thing as independent contractors, and you get to meet and connect with all the people that you're shooting. So it's super nice to be able to have opportunities like that. And then, in the meantime, making my hotel connections and doing collaborations with
yeah,
the hotels, and then, working with local companies doing product photography. And then I keep my own stuff as my landscapes and,
yeah.
just travel scenery stuff for me.
That's cool. I mean, I always look at it. I interviewed one other photographer, and he does all landscape. And he started because he owned a guitar shop, and he didn't like the pictures that people were taking of the guitars. So he bought a real camera, started taking pictures of the guitars to post
Right.
out, and now he's got 200,000 followers on Instagram, and
Yeah.
he quit his job, and now he takes photos, and he's an
Yeah.
official photographer for the city of Houston and a whole bunch of stuff. So
Yeah.
it's possible. It's out there.
Yeah, it's definitely possible, and there's quite a few people doing it, and it's like, if other people can do it, so can you. It's just working on your craft, developing your craft. And for me, I was fortunate; it was something that came natural to me. But you know, using a camera isn't something that comes really naturally to anybody. Sure, the perspective and the composition and the framing may, but everybody still has that learning curve
Yeah.
of, how do I use this camera? How do I make the settings work? How do I adjust the settings so things look proper? Because that's really what it's about when you're shooting photography. If you don't know how to use the equipment, you could have the most expensive camera in the world, but if you don't know how to use it, the photos aren't going to come out right.
Yeah. Do you ever get that? Because this is for me, and I was just curious if you get that. I, I'll take some pictures, because I'm on the road and I travel, and I'll take a picture, and then I get back and I'll play with it. And I go, oh man, I wish I could go back like 3 feet, or I wish I should have done this or that.
Yeah, it happens to me still all the time. And, I think that's a part of the process and learning to really master your craft, because even though it may not be a photo that I may necessarily use because of those things,
Yeah,
it's a learning experience for me for next time to be like, okay, I need to back up a little bit maybe, or be
yeah,
more aware of the framing and what's actually in the frame in the moment, so that I can really adjust either my positioning or the angle or what exactly it is that's my subject to really get the photo and the composition and everything correct that I'm looking for.
Yeah. That's the
And I
one
think
thing I always
too,
find.
yeah, and it's like I had wrote something on my Instagram not too long ago, about every once in a while, because it doesn't happen all the time, but every once in a while, you really just get a photo where you're just like, wow, this one is really, really good.
Yeah.
And it's not something that happens every day or every time you shoot. It's kind of like the same thing with musicians. Every song that they make isn't a top Billboard, trended song. And it's kind of the same thing with art. Not
Sure.
every piece that you create is going to be your best piece. There'll be a lot more moderate, mediocre, this is okay type of photos, and then every once in a while you get those few ones where you're like, this is incredible.
Well, the
And
other
it's
thing
a really great
the other
feeling.
thing I found with art and being subjective, music, and I have some great episodes. I mean, episodes I'm like, oh man, I want people to listen to this episode, and it
Right.
doesn't get that many plays
Yeah.
for whatever reason. I don't know. And then there's other episodes where I'm like, that was all right. And then I'm like watching the counts, and I'm like, whoa. And same thing with
Yeah.
photography. There's pictures I love. Like there's pictures I want to blow up, and then there's other pictures that I sold. The first picture I ever sold wasn't even one of my top 10. I was
Yeah.
I'm like, yeah, that's nice. And then someone like, oh, I love it. And I'm like, really? You know?
Yeah.
So it's just, you know, what touches you might not touch other people. And I think
Yeah,
that's,
and it's funny that you say that because I started kind of experimenting with that where I would post two different photos on my story and then post a poll and let the people vote on which ones they like better. And it's really funny that you say that because I can honestly say 90% of the time when the people vote, they pick the one opposite to what I like the
yeah,
most.
yeah,
And it's really interesting because there's been a few photos in the past where I'm like, I don't really know, like, if I like this enough to post it and whatever, and then I end up posting it, and it ends up being, like, one of my most engaged photos. Like, I
yeah,
had posted a photo, from Washington a little while back of me skateboarding in the middle of the street with a mountain in the background, and there was just something about it where I was like, I don't know if I like this. And when I was editing it, I kind of was just like struggling with the
right,
color a little bit and I couldn't get the color exactly the way I wanted it. So I was like, I'm not going to post this. And then, I had sent it to a friend and they were like, oh my God, that's so awesome. Like, you should post it. And I was like, I don't know.
really,
And I
yeah,
ended up just posting it. And it was like, everybody loved it. And it's just really funny to see that. I
yeah.
think it's really interesting the photos that you think are the best are not what everyone else thinks are the best, which is a really interesting thing.
I think musicians have the same deal. Like there are some songs that are really personal that they do, and they don't become even on the top played of that album. And then there's
Right.
other ones that they know are going to be poppy or whatever, and they make and now they have to play it for the next 30 years, and they're like,
Yeah.
but the song that really meant the most to them might not get played.
Yeah.
So that's
I
just
think
something
it
we all
really
have to do.
circles around back to not being so hard on yourself and not judging the work that you produce. Like, just put it out
Yep.
because you never know how people are going to react to it. And it's really, I've been humbled a few times in that aspect where they're like I just said previously, there's been photos where I'm like, I don't know if I should, put this out, and then you put it out and it goes the exact opposite way of what you thought about it. And it really just made me realize, just post it. If people don't like it, they don't like it. And if they do, they do.
Yep. Well, I did my first international, and the only one I've done was Misaki Aono, who's a Japanese rockabilly singer, and
Okay.
she doesn't speak English, so we had to do it through a translation. And I had the translator. It was a three-way thing, and it's my second most viewed episode.
Wow.
And it was just, like her and I literally didn't speak to each other. It was always through.
The
But
translate.
I'm getting a lot of plays in Japan because of it. So who knows?
That's awesome.
You
That's
know.
really cool.
So and for a long time I reached out to her and I didn't know she didn't speak English. And then the president of her record label was contacting me and because he spoke broken English. And then everything just worked out because my daughter's best friend from high school end up being a Japanese translator for Sony
Okay.
Pictures here in LA. So my daughter's like, "Oh, you should have contact Rue and see if he'll do it." And I'm like, "Really?" And all of a sudden he's like, "Yeah, I'd love to do it." It's just so everything that worked out. But
Yeah.
I almost said no to it because I'm like, it's not worth it. It's gonna be a hassle.
Right.
If we don't speak, there won't be
For
that
sure.
connection. But now it's thousands of listens later. I'm like, oh my gosh, how I got to go back and see how it works. You know,
Yeah. Well, that's cool because now you know you can do that with anybody from anywhere in any language as long as you have a translator.
it's been awesome. I mean, we're in Hawaii. You're in Hawaii. I've had a guest in Croatia. I had a guest in Jamaica. I
Uh-huh.
mean, so
Yeah.
I love technology.
Yeah, and I bet it's cool to be able to talk to different people from all different walks of life all around the world.
If you like talking to people, which I do. So yeah, I
Yeah.
mean, it's it's crazy to think, you know, you can't even. I mean, it's impossible to think 20 years ago when I'm mid 50s now. So in my early 30s, late 20s, I would have been like, you, impossible to say you're going to be reaching people around the world,
Right.
without having a network TV behind you and all that.
Yeah, for
So
sure.
yeah, so it's pretty cool.
It
And
is pretty
now I have a contact, a photographer. So when I go back to Maui, I can, if
yeah.
I go in the next 6 months, so you just
Never
never
know,
know.
it might stay longer, but that's why I don't like saying because I don't know, you
Yeah.
know? Opportunities come up all the time, and a lot of the times they have the potential to change location, and if it's gonna change my location, I'll go.
Do you think? I'm curious because it would be difficult to do something in Australia right now or New Zealand, Japan because of the lockdown, the pandemic, and all that. So is that it might be a good thing that you're at least for now planning on spending the next 6 months in Maui.
Yeah, and that's been a part of the reason, just because with all the COVID stuff and things being so uncertain in so many different places, it gives me a chance to really sit still for a while and just focus on building
Yeah.
and really just kind of branching out more things and expanding myself. And it's easier for me to do that when I'm still for a longer period of time rather than, having the constant movement of traveling, traveling, traveling. I mean, I've been quite a few places this year, and it's nice to just be still for a while sometimes. And
Yeah.
then, for me, when I'm over it and I get bored of the place that I'm in, I go somewhere else.
Pretty simple.
Yeah. Sounds simple.
Yeah. Well,
Yeah.
I appreciate the time. What's the best way for my listeners to follow you and see what you have going on?
On Instagram at Lost Layovers and my blog at www.lostlayovers.com.
So Lost Layover is you.
That's me.
I gotcha.
Lost laying over.
I'll make sure to include all the links, on my website and all that, so to make it as easy as possible for people to follow you. And once they see your photos, I think they'll be in.
Yeah, I,
So,
I appreciate it.
absolutely. Thank you again for the time. I can't wait to see what you still have coming up.
Yeah, I appreciate you doing this interview with me. It's been a pleasure, and I look forward to keeping up with your journey.
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks, Katie.
Yeah, of course. Thanks so much, Pete. I appreciate it.
Okay. Talk to you later.
Bye.